extreme right-wing individuals in the Congress to take us down this hostage-taking exercise.
And as of right now, I'm using the Blue Jays resources to better educate myself.
We are going to go deep on debt and how it works and why debt is important to solve as an issue in this country. Also judging baseball players by how they can act, a weird thing we're in culturally. Boycotts work, and a bunch more on this episode of Daily Caller Live. My name is Jobob. Thanks so much for tuning in. Daily Caller Live starts right now.
2, 1.
Here we go!
That might be the only brown guy on earth named Jobob. That is actually her name, Jobob.
Live from the dingy bunker, completely cut off from the outside world, except for you fine folks. My name is Jobob. This is Daily Caller Live. Thanks so much for tuning in. On today, it is the last day of AAPI Heritage Month. My month is ending today, I guess. May 31st, Wednesday, the year of our Lord 2023. What is going on today? Oh, I wonder if something else is going on any of the channels. We got a lower count today, which is fine because I'll tell you what, today's show is going to be a total and utter snooze fest. I know that's not a thing that you should say as a talk show person, I guess. But we're going to talk about the debt. We're going to talk about the Federal Reserve. We're going to talk about the Treasury. We're going to talk about bonds. And I'll be upfront and honest with you. It's going to be very boring. I would like to get some comments in the comment section, get to some of the comments in the comment section to see, thoughts and how people view this sort of stuff. But this whole conversation around the debt ceiling sparked an interest in me of explaining what the heck the debt is, because I think a lot of people don't understand what the debt is. You know what? Before we go into that, I want to talk about this because the government is as big as its spending is. The debt is only relative to how much the government spends. The true rate of taxation is government spending. Now, we can talk about, I paid this much in taxes and people this and just taxes, and that's all fine. But at the end of the day, all of those taxes, if they don't amount to what the spending of the government is, it's kind of a useless thing to talk about. In other words, the rate that you're currently paying in your income tax, sales tax, whatever the taxes that you're paying, that matters in lessening the burden, but isn't the actual rate of taxation. The actual rate of taxation is how much the government spends. I know, we're off to a riveting start here. But when we talk about government spending, we need to talk about, when we talk about taxes and we talk about debt, we need to talk about government spending. Did you know, this is according to the Cato Institute, actually this is according to CBO numbers, the Congressional Budget Office, that since 2019, federal spending is up 40%. Throughout the entire history of the government, it has been an incremental increase, but in the last 3 years, federal spending has gone up 40%, jumped from $4.45 trillion in 2019 to $6.2 trillion in 2023, according to the Congressional Budget Office. This is a 40% increase in 4 years. Now, goes without saying, we had a pandemic. That was a big thing. The government locked people out of their jobs and therefore needed to spend money to keep people afloat. Maybe. But then, of course, this whole debt ceiling talk that we're all talking about now, or at least the political people in Washington, D.C. are talking about, shouldn't we then go back to what previous COVID spending was? That seems reasonable. Well, that's not what we're doing. Instead, the debt limit bill that is currently circulating through Congress is going to increase spending even more than that. So let me rephrase this and put it in a nice, tight little bubble. Since 2019, our spending as a federal government has jumped 40%, which is astronomically high. Now, you can make the argument for COVID, you know, all that sort of stuff. But instead of going back to pre-COVID spending levels, we are now discussing a bill that will probably pass to increase spending. which is what an addled cokehead shopaholic would do. Now, I think it goes without saying that the addled cokehead shopaholic would look at the federal government and go, "This is insane." We can go through. There's a bunch of this stuff in the CBO report of the increase. Okay, well let's talk about this. Defense spending is up 18% since 2019. Non-defense is up 43%, including entitlement. Social Security spending is up 33%. Medicare is up 27%. Medicaid is up 44%. Food stamps is up 102%. Healthcare tax credits is up 45%. The bottom line is, when we talk about government spending, well, when we talk about taxation, which is what I care about, the real rate of taxation is government spending. Okay, so what does the government spending look like? It is ballooned by 40% since 2019, and instead of reverting back to pre-COVID government spending, we are now discussing a bill that is going to increase spending past the astronomical spending of COVID by not cutting anything, and we think that that's not going to be a problem. So there's that. Which brings us to debt. What is debt? Does it make any sense to have? Are we going to perpetually have debt? These are complicated questions that I feel like need to be talked about. In a perpetual state of existence, which the United States is currently in, there's no end date, unlike yours and my life. Will there be a perpetual state of debt? Yes. That should be understood. Unlike me and you, when you spend money on a credit card, that credit card eventually the balance has to eventually get to zero. But if you live forever, you could potentially, perpetually, forever have a debt balance on your credit card, your mortgage, whatever it is. You can always be carrying debt. Now, I understand that there's some existences in human life where you have businesses and corporate entities that have perpetual debt. I understand that. That's not what I'm talking about. But unlike you and I, who have to eventually pay that debt down to zero, the federal government exists in a place of perpetual debt. And in a lot of ways, that's okay to a certain extent. Now, the problem becomes, well, what is the limit in which we can no longer sustain the debt that we already have? In other words, if you have debt, you do have to make payments on that debt, even if it's perpetual and long-lasting and seemingly going on into perpetuity. You do have to sustain that debt. You can't just rack up debt and make no payments, because the reason behind, well, the only reason that you can't do that is because real individuals and entities, real people, own that debt. If you don't know this, when the U.S. goes into debt, the Treasury issues bonds. Now, I understand that this could be really, really rudimentary for a lot of people. But I feel like we have to talk about it, because this is a big thing in modern culture. And we'll get to the baseball stuff in a little bit. I warned you, this is going to be a boring episode. When the U.S. takes on debt, when the federal government spends money that it doesn't necessarily have, the Treasury issues bonds and other securities, which simplifying it down into the Treasury issues bonds. Those bonds are then purchased by individuals. You and I can purchase Treasury bonds. Companies can purchase Treasury bonds. And the reason we would want to do that is because it's an investment, and our understanding is when we purchase those bonds, the interest on those bonds go up, and the federal government will eventually pay that back to you. Say you have a bond with a 15-year yield. In 15 years, that bond is going to mature, and then you can cash it in for cash from the federal government. That's the money that they have to pay back. Currently, right now, I should have looked this up specifically, but currently, the interest on our debt is the biggest thing that we spend money on. I think. Let me hold on. Let me just Google that really quick. Interest on the debt. I should have had this ready beforehand. 5x. The U.S. is paying a record amount of interest on the debt, and it's only going to get worse. This is from CNN.com, not a right-leaning organization. The Treasury Department paid a record $213 billion in interest payments on the national debt in the last quarter of 2022, up $63 billion from the same period a year earlier. The fourth quarter was also nearly $30 billion more in the prior quarter, yada, 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 yada. Bottom line is, we pay an exorbitant amount of money on the interest of the debt. Now, what people are talking about, this increasing the debt ceiling, is the federal government then borrowing from itself to pay the interest on the previously borrowed money, which is like you taking out a credit card to pay down the credit card and then taking out another credit card to pay down the credit card that you used to pay down that credit card, and the cycle continues to go on and on and on. Now, why is it a problem when we are issuing more and more and more and more and more debt? Because eventually there is a time, there is a point, and I don't know what it is, I'm not going to claim to know what it is, nobody knows what it is. There are various people that think that this particular time stamp is way, way further. I tend to think it's probably way closer. There is a point in which investors, or people like me and you who want to protect investments and buy U.S. Treasury bonds, will stop buying U.S. Treasury bonds. There is a limit where the math just doesn't work. And so if it can't continue forever, it has to end. That is the most rudimentary piece of logic, right? If something can't continue forever, it has to end. In other words, as it relates to debt, if there is a point in which people will no longer buy U.S. Treasury bonds, then at some point, the U.S. federal government has to either stop borrowing or increase taxes on the next generation as much as humanly possible to pay that debt so that we don't default on it and honestly send the banking industry into a tumble. All of that's to say is that there are limits. Nobody knows what the limits are, but at some point, the debt is going to collapse the entire system that we've built. Now knowing that, and maybe you already knew that, I want you to watch this clip from Hakeem Jeffries talking to, is it Chris Matthews on MSNBC, about eliminating the debt ceiling as a whole, entirely getting rid of it as a, I don't know if this is a short-term political move, but now knowing that there is a point where people will stop investing in U.S. Treasury, is it then smart to say, well, we should just make it an unlimited money fund. Let's just get rid of debt ceilings, which are self-imposed by Congress. Let's just get rid of all that together, because there will never be a time where people won't buy U.S. Treasury debt. I fundamentally disagree, but I want you to listen to what the leader of the Democrats in the House is saying. And I'll tell you this, he calls people that want to be fiscally responsible extremists. But if you believe something that fundamentally cannot happen, doesn't that make you an extremist, Hakeem? Check this out.
Has it changed anyone's thinking among your House colleagues that you have to get rid of this thing once and for all, whether it's to do what Gephardt did when he was your Democratic leader and essentially come together and just get rid of it statutorily, whether the White House has to look into saying, look, the Constitution doesn't allow us not to pay our debts? But where are you on that? Because that seems to me still the kind of unfinished business of this deal.
Yes, I think very good point, Chris. It's an all of the above approach. First thing that we have to do is get through this moment, make sure the country pays our bills, avoid a default, and we can continue to build an economy that works for everyday Americans, building upon the great record of accomplishment that came out of the last Congress. But we also have to find our way out of enabling extreme right-wing individuals in the Congress to use the debt ceiling down the road to take us down this hostage-taking exercise and try to extract a painful ransom. And so we need to look at the options legislatively. I think that would be the best solution that's in front of.
I think we probably have to stop there because, and I don't know if we'll continue, but extreme Republicans holding people hostage, rhetorically speaking, legislatively speaking, because they worry about a massive issue that is going to implode at some point. Got a couple comments here that I think are kind of interesting. Marcel says, our children and grandchildren will end up paying for this mess. Yeah, that's what it is. When people talk about borrowing from the future generations, it's not what it is, it's stealing from the future generations. The debt can't go on in perpetuity. Now, maybe we can get into some of the monetary policy between the Fed and the Treasury. But at the end of the day, the next generations, we are stealing from them. Not even at gunpoint, just because there's nothing they can do about it. And that's been happening for the last, 70 years? The current generation is just robbing the future generations blind. That's who's going to end up having to pay for it. Mike says, Jobob, stop using logic. The government is the government you're talking about, LOL. Yeah, that's, I understand that. Let's see. Ryan says, because interest rates are going up, we aren't paying down the principal. That's also correct. Jody says, we are already way past that timestamp, talking about whether or not we are past the point of people not buying debt. I don't think we're there yet necessarily because people are still buying U.S. debt. But there is a time where China, who owns a lot of U.S. debt, Japan, who owns a ton of U.S. debt, says, yeah, I don't think that's the best investment for us because they can't continue to buy themselves out of that debt. Now, here's one of the things that a lot of people talk about, and this is going to get really into the weeds, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not even entirely sure if I quite understand it. But there's this weird monetary trick that's been going on because I would imagine, considering our insurmountable amount of debt as a country, because there are entities and groups who no longer want to continue buying U.S. debt because they don't feel super safe about it. The Federal Reserve, which is a government entity that isn't a government entity, kind of, is purchasing treasury bonds. And they're purchasing treasury bonds used by the interest, but they're purchasing treasury bonds with cash generated by interest of rate hikes going up and down. And again, I'll say that I'm not entirely sure that I'm making sense when I'm explaining this. The problem with the Federal Reserve purchasing treasury bonds as a way to kind of flip the monetary system to where debt is just endless, the problem with that is we get massive inflation, which is what we've seen constantly. A lot of the inflation, a lot of people believe, was caused by the Federal Reserve purchasing treasury bonds and effectively putting more money into circulation. I know that's into the weeds, and again, I'm not entirely sure what I'm talking about myself, but all of the monetary tricks that are trying to be pulled by a lot of the institutions to try and make more debt work, I don't think in the long run are going to have the effect that a lot of the hopeful government spend people think they're going to have. I told you this is boring. So you know what? We'll end the boring there. Bottom line here is that debt matters. The U.S. national debt matters. And people who are out there saying, well, we should just suspend the debt limit as a whole. It's self-imposed. It's stupid. Those people are going to screw your kids and your grandkids, my kids and my grandkids. Because at the end of the day, if something can't go on forever, it must end. That's just how the world works. And the U.S. debt, as it stands now, and the continual purchase of people buying into the U.S. debt cannot go on forever. It will have to end at some point. And what does that look like? I think spending into oblivion is only going to hasten the default isn't even the right word, the collapse of the monetary system as we know it. Maybe ultimately what this entire 20-minute thing is a pitch for Bitcoin. Maybe that's what it is. A couple people mentioned the gold standard in here. So we're going to move on to this, though. Maybe some good-ish news. I don't know if this is good news to you. But some numbers are in from Bud Light, and they are not good by any stretch of the imagination. Bud Light sales continue to plunge because of the boycott inspired by the brand's advertising partnership with transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney, the New York Post reported. The beer brand's sales have dropped 25.7% for the week of May 20 after a 24.6% decline the week before, according to data reviewed by the New York Post. Sales volume, the total number of beers sold, dropped 29.5% compared to the same time period last year. 30% drop in sales for Bud Light. This marks the 6th straight week that Bud Light sales have gone down since Dylan Mulvaney posted an advertisement for Bud Light on April 1st, which I'll be honest with you, and I'm looking at the date now and I'm remembering it in my head. I thought that was a joke. I thought it was an April Fool's joke that Bud Light was giving Dylan Mulvaney money. At the same time, rival beer brands, and I'm sorry I'm just reading here, but I thought this was fascinating because I didn't think that boycotts, not that I didn't know the boycotts worked, but I didn't think the conservative side of the country could actually pull something off. If you know anything about conservative politics, Republicans, conservatives, whatever you want to call them, free market people, it's like herding cats. One of the greatest assets of conservatives is that there are free-thinking individuals that look out for the individual self and don't depend on other people to tell them what to do. That is the greatest asset of conservatives. The greatest weakness of conservatives is that they're individuals and they only look after what's going on. All of the same things. It is a gift and a curse. And so all I'm trying to say is it's very, very difficult to get conservatives to coalesce. The term herding cats has been used before when talking about trying to get conservatives to move in one particular direction. It's very, very difficult. So at the end, I didn't know that this could actually be done, but apparently it has. So at the same time, during the same time period, sales for rival beer companies or brands, Modelo jumped 9.2% for the week ending in May 20, based on Bump Williams Consulting and Nielsen IQ data, the New York Post reported. In a 4-week period at May 20th, Bud Light sales dropped 24.3% and Modelo grew by 8%. Bud Light's parent company, Anheuser-Busch InBev, owns Modelo. Except for its U.S. operation, which is run by U.S. Beverage. Wow, interesting. Okay, so they own Modelo outside of the U.S. And so that also means, too, that Anheuser-Busch also is taking a hit, not just the Bud Light brand, which is a fascinating thing. Target surpassed $10 billion in lost stock yesterday, so that's a thing, too. But speaking about boycotts and different things, I think that brings us nicely to this, and we'll kind of wrap things up on this one. This is a weird component. I don't know why I pounded my fist like I was Joe Biden in front of Independence Hall. This is a weird phenomenon in this country, and just in general in the scope of social media and all of this sort of stuff. There's a big story behind this. We could talk about, well, maybe we'll get into that a little bit later because it hasn't happened yet, and I would imagine that on that particular day there's going to be some mayhem, rhetorical mayhem, not actual mayhem. The Dodgers, if you haven't heard about this, previously disinvited this group, this like We Make Fun of Catholics group, to Dodger Stadium on whatever their June celebratory gay pride, whatever, LGBTQ plus 648. I don't know. They disinvited this group, and then the group got all upset. Then they re-invited the group, and now Catholics/conservatives are upset because how just horrible this group is. I understand that. Again, we can talk about that when that day actually happens. Clayton Kershaw has come out against it among several other big players. Like, hey, man, like this is not cool. I don't think they're going to boycott the game, but it's interesting to see players now coming out and saying this is not what I signed up for. But I thought this was fascinating. This guy's name is Anthony Bass. Anthony Bass or Anthony Bass? Not sure how he pronounces it. But this guy tweeted out, let me just read this. This is also from the New York Post. Toronto Blue Jays relief pitcher Anthony Bass is facing backlash over an Instagram post. He shared an Instagram story about boycotting Target and Bud Light, which has been publicly supporting LGBTQ plus T69 rights. On Tuesday, Bass reposted a video to his Instagram story that appeared to be emboldening the boycott on Target and Bud Light and therefore anti-LGBTQ22 plus IA for biblical reasons, and made a case for why Christians should boycott Target. I saw the video. It's rather long, so I didn't bring it on here, but he just shared it to his story. He was met with backlash and then issued this apology. Now, I want you to watch the apology, and then we'll talk about this weird cultural dynamic phenomenon that is apparently we are judging baseball players by their acting skills. Watch this.
I recognized yesterday I made a post that was hurtful to the Pride community, which includes friends of mine and close family members of mine, and I am truly sorry for that. I just spoke with my teammates and shared with them my actions yesterday. I apologized with them, and as of right now, I'm using the Blue Jays resources to better educate myself, to make better decisions moving forward. The ballpark is for everybody. We include all fans at the ballpark, and we want to welcome everybody. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay. What did we think about that apology? Now, and this is where I think it gets interesting. I don't think he's changed his mind. I think and in his position, a major league relief pitcher who is probably providing for a family, who has a lot on the line here. I understand hey, I'm not gonna throw away my career on this hill. Maybe after my playing career is done, we can talk more. I mean, Curt Schilling's probably a pretty good example. Stayed out of the political discourse, and maybe he didn't know anything about the political discourse. But a lot of people stay out of the culture war until their money's made, they're retired, and then they can go do whatever they want. Again, Curt Schilling being a pretty prime example of he can do whatever he wants now and is doing it. So I understand that. And if I understand not wanting to throw away your entire career and this not being the hill you want to die on, I understand the apology that then therefore is necessitated by wanting to maintain the career he currently has. So then the question becomes, do people who are offended by this, who are getting backlash from him sharing an Instagram story, believe the apology? Because I guarantee you, his worldview didn't change in the couple hours between resharing that video and this apology. In other words, he's doing the apology to check a box. And the box that needs to be checked is that do the offended parties believe him? In other words, acting. This is what we pay actors to do. Does the audience believe the words that are coming from your mouth that are on the script? Because we probably can deduce from the fact that his mind hasn't changed on this. I can't imagine his entire worldview, upbringing, whatever you want to call it, just in a couple hours shifted entirely. Because we don't think that that happens, he's effectively performing an act of having to apologize in order to save his career. The question then is, are the people who were offended by what he shared on his Instagram story, do they believe what he said? And where I think it gets even more interesting is if you say the words but aren't believable. Well, okay, so this is where I think the acting part comes to full fruition. If he were to say the exact thing that he just said, but read it off his phone, not sounding sincere, would that apology be accepted by those who were offended? And the answer is no. If he just sat there and said, I'd like to apologize for the acts. This is not my intention. I'm not trying to disparage the Blue Jay organization. Threw an eye roll in there somewhere. If he read the exact same thing that he said that way, and people weren't convinced, that means that his acting performance matters. Which leads to the main point of this is effing crazy. At the end of the day, this is all absolutely freaking crazy. Because his mind didn't change, and because the people aggrieved need to believe that his mind was changed, or at least could take to their audience that, well, he looked like he maybe possibly meant it. We are judging the acting ability of a Blue Jays relief pitcher in the culture wars. WTF. I don't know. And on that note, we'll say goodbye. That'll do it for us today. Appreciate you sticking around, tuning in. Let us know in the comment section. Did you buy the acting? Would you take this Blue Jay relief pitcher's acting class? I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Tim says, and the Oscar goes to, yeah. Isn't that crazy? Isn't this crazy? Isn't all of this freaking crazy? Anyways, that'll do it for us today. Appreciate you sticking around, tuning in. If you haven't already, give me a follow on any of your social media platforms. Just type in JOBOB on the Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Getter. We're on Rumble now. We stream to Rumble, so if you're not watching on Rumble, you can be. Not saying you should be, but you can be. And we will see you same time, same place tomorrow. That was an abrupt ending. Appreciate you sticking around, tuning in. We'll see you same time, same place tomorrow. God bless America.